So welcome to MFT Theories with KV. We are studying, and I believe this is chapter 4. I could be wrong, forgive me if I'm wrong, but this is about strategic therapy. So if you are following along, again, eventually I'm going to make this timeline into something that I will post. But we started again with individual psychotherapy. So that was, again, the person is the problem. Then our mind started opening and we got into the idea that general systems was a thing. So we had general systems theory, that things are run as a system. And that kind of gave the dawning of family therapy. We've already gone through Bowen, if you have been following along. I also did one on MRI, and then I did one on experiential just a moment ago. But now we're going to go back under MRI. So it depends, again, how you kind of watch my videos, but this is going to go right under MRI because Jay Haley worked with MRI. He was part of the Milan group. But Milan was all about, remember, he was a traffic, he was trying to look at the pattern, he was looking for the pattern. But Jay Haley, who was working with MRI at the time, but I like that you found the pattern, but now I want action. He wanted action. He wanted something to be done. And with this section, we are also going to be going to the evolution of Jay Haley's strategic therapy, because remember, he wanted a strategy. He wanted a strategy towards getting out of the traffic that MRI had found. So he developed strategic strategy to how we're going to strategically get out of the traffic jam. He developed strategic therapy. And from that, there was even an evolution within that when he met Miss Madanes. So when Haley-Madanes was there, she added her 2 cents. And so these two sections, because Haley-Madanes grows from Haley's strategic therapy, we're going to do this one chapter, okay? So let's begin. So strategic, again, what move happens next? Change one move and change the whole game. Every problem is a game with rules. Again, Jay Haley worked with MRI. He worked with them and he was all about, yes, we see the traffic, we see the problem, but wanted action. He's called the chess grandmaster, or in some way, a lot of times in textbooks, I've noticed he's considered the chess player, again, because he's actually moving things, taking action, strategically moving things. He does not first ask who has power or how everyone feels. Remember, he's not about feelings. He's not looking about hierarchy. He watches each move in the intersection, just like MRI. So it starts a lot very similar to MRI, but there's the next step, and this is what this is about. Again, if you've been following along with all my previous chapters, all these therapists are growing off of one another. They're asking the questions the previous therapist had missed, or going a little bit deeper. He watched each move in their interaction. Someone criticizes, another rescues, and the cycle repeats. His style is active, it's practical, it's very direct, it's creative, it's obviously strategic. What he believes caused the problem. Strategic therapists believe problems persist because repetitive interactional patterns keep them alive. The symptoms often serve a purpose within the family system, and it is maintained by unsuccessful attempts to solve it. So why? Haley observed that families frequently repeat the same solution over and over, unintentionally strengthening the very problem they wanted to eliminate. What he notices first is the interactional patterns. He notices the sequences of interactions. Remember, he's observing what starts the cycle, who responds, what happens next, what reward keeps the behavior going, and what purpose does the symptom serve? So why? Because understanding the sequences reveal exactly where change can be introduced. You can't know what you need to do if you don't know what the problem is. So observing, okay, and how can we, again, not just knowing what this problem is, not knowing where the traffic jam is, but how do we get out of it? What can we actively do to change this pattern? The family's attempted solutions have become the problem, and they were fascinated by why the problem continues. He's always thinking, what move should I make next? Every intervention has a purpose. Nothing is accidental. He is all action, action, action. What can we do? What can we do? If the problem is maintained by interaction, then the therapist should strategically interrupt that interaction. Founder. Okay. So Jay Haley, of course, 1923 to 2007. He was fascinated by communication. We know he worked for the MRI Palo Alto group. He learned that families become trapped in repetitive interactional patterns, but eventually he became frustrated. He believed MRI therapists were excellent at identifying the patterns, but not active enough in terms of changing them. So Haley asks, if I already know what's maintaining the problem, I already see that this is a cycle, why not deliberately interrupt it? If A plus B equals C, when we don't want C, well then change B. Make B a D. That question became strategic therapy. Strategic, think strategy, think action, think doing, being direct, changing that pattern. And remember, it's evolving from MRI, and MRI was all about the traffic, looking at the pattern. This is the next step. Now we're going to interrupt that pattern. It all grows. It's all developing. It's all picking up from where the last therapist let off. Historical context. By the 1960s, family therapy had several major branches. Haley wanted therapy to become shorter, more direct, more active, and more strategic. Remember, we've now moved forward, okay? Remember, in the very beginning, if you've been watching my other videos, when we were the problem was the one person. We're not there anymore. We are now over here in our timeline. We're not in the beginning. So we are getting further and further from that. It is the person, the problem is within the person. We are getting further and further away from that. And now we're starting to more expand into the connections. We're starting to, again, that systems theory. So Haley is like, okay, we see the patterns that MRI found. Now we're going to break that pattern that MRI found, okay? Builds upon each other. Why this theory was created. MRI identified interactional patterns like we talked about. Haley wanted to change them faster. He believed insight alone rarely changes behavior. So just talking and knowing about it, he believed like that's good, but he didn't believe that got to the core problem. Families change when they behave differently. Therefore, the therapist should actively design interventions. This is all chock full of interventions. This is a intervention plethora of things that are going to be done. Remember, strategic, doing things, action, action, action. The core belief says symptoms continue because they serve a function inside the family. Interrupt the function, the symptoms lose its purpose. Why? Because families unintentionally reinforce problems. Therapists should strategically interrupt those patterns. Analogy. Imagine a family stuck playing Monopoly. Every game ends exactly the same. Everyone complains. Nobody changes a rule. Strategic therapy says, flip the board, do something unexpected. Force the system to reorganize. Questions he would ask. What happens immediately before the problem? Again, he's trying to figure out the pattern first, because it's very much like MRI. It starts as MRI, but he goes a step further. And in those questions that you see in your exam, how you're going to know whether or not it's just MRI or if it's going down the next level to strategic is all based on the words that they use. And so the interventional words that they use, and I will go through the exam questions, those key words that separate MRI from strategic. A great way to identify immediately in the exam whether or not it is asking an MRI question or a strategic question is whether it stops at identifying the pattern or if it goes a step further and it starts trying to disrupt that pattern. Then that's strategic, that's action, okay? Starting to build off of one another and realize and how to separate the identity of one versus the other in the exam. That's key. So again, back to questions he would ask. What does everyone do next? What has the family already tried? When is the symptom strongest? What would happen if nobody responded in the usual way? Again, he's asking questions about the pattern, about the symptom, about the behavior that's happening. What's causing it? What are the triggers? What's around it? Because we can't change it until we don't know what it is. Again, why? These questions uncover the interactional pattern rather than the individual pathology. Again, we're not doing individual junk. We're not going anywhere else. We're just trying to figure out what's that pattern and how do we interrupt it. Quite often, it's do the opposite, do something different, something like that. You'll see. How can I strategically change this problem? How can I, as a therapist, help them strategically change this chaotic pattern that this family is stuck in? So the goal is to interrupt the game. Interrupt the repetitive cycle. Step 1. If you see that in an exam, it is for sure strategic. Eliminate the ineffective attempted solution. So if you keep doing this, and kind of like I've said before, Albert Einstein, if you are doing the same thing, hoping for a different outcome, that is strictly insanity, child. Don't do that. Reduce the need for the symptom. So whatever it is, okay, well, let's change that. Create new interactional patterns. Again, we are changing the patterns. We are morphing the game. We are adjusting this pattern to create something different. Why? Because if the sequence changes, the symptoms often lose its purpose and fades. So the strengths for strategic therapy are that it's highly effective with behavioral problems because you're actively doing something. It's great with resistant families, again, children with behavioral concerns. It is considered another brief therapy because, again, you're doing something from day one. Okay, what's the problem? That's the problem. Try this instead and see if that problem's still there. Again, we're doing something different immediately almost. Weaknesses, it may spend less time exploring emotions, attachment injuries, trauma history, or deeper personal meanings. Again, it's not looking inwardly, it's just looking at the pattern, the system. And why are those things considered their weaknesses? Because the main focus remains on changing the present interactions rather than processing the emotions or insight. So that's the problem. Some clues for when you're taking the exam that will tell you immediately that it is strategic, as if it talks about directives. Again, do this. Paradox, these are interventions, which we will go about in a moment. Prescribing the symptom, ordeal, interactional sequence, symptom maintenance, family games, power struggles, strategic task, interrupting repetitive cycles, anything like that in that verbiage in the exam. Start honing in your mind towards strategic thoughts, because that's what they're talking about. So major interventions, the first one was directives, which is homework designed to change the interaction. Again, action, 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 do this. We're trying to tweak this. We're trying to change this pattern. Examples, parents must spend 20 minutes uninterrupted together every evening. That's what you're gonna do. Paradoxical interventions, one of the most famous strategic interventions. Instead of stopping the symptoms, prescribe it. So a child who throws tantrums is instructed to schedule one tantrum every evening at 7. Because when symptoms become voluntary, they often lose their function. Ordeals, again, you're telling them, you're requiring the client to perform something more unpleasant than the symptoms. Example, if you stay up worrying, clean the kitchen every time you can't sleep. Eventually, the symptom isn't even worth the ordeal. Reframing, so giving the symptom a different meaning. Okay, it's a different strategy. Okay, well, let's give it some different meaning. So your son's arguing may actually be his attempt to become independent. You know, maybe he's trying to show that he has his own voice. Maybe there's something behind that. Again, yes, some of these things mimic other theories that they pulled off from. Some of these theories mirror other thoughts, and so that's why it can become a little confusing, because truth is, a lot of this is connected. It all is. But now, for the exam's purposes, it's trying to see which chunk are they asking for. Is it from here, from here, from here? Where in the timeline are they asking? Within that timeline, what did that therapist do? What were their insights? Why did they do it? What would they do next? What were they looking for? All those things. Another intervention, and the last one we're going to talk about for strategic, is pretend technique. So especially useful with children. Ask them to pretend to have the symptoms. Making it playful reduces its power. Another thing you can do. Here's an example. Parents complain. Our son refuses to clean his room. Instead of asking why, Haley would ask, who benefits if the room stays messy? Then he creates homework that changes the interaction. The goal isn't understanding. The goal is changing the game. 5-second recognition. If the question in the exam mentions directives, paradox, homework, prescribing, ordeals, strategic planning, think J. Haley. Think strategic. Strategic families don't change because they understand. They change because they behave differently. Another example. Therapist says, tonight I want both of you to argue for 15 minutes. That's strategic, because the clue is a directive designed to change the behavior. The moment you see a directive that is there to change behavior, change the pattern, that's strategic. Directive, paradox, ordeal, prescribe the symptom, therapist giving a strategic assignment, that's strategic. Remember, strategic always asks how to defeat the pattern. Now, we are going into the evolution to Haley-Madanes strategic thinking, or strategic therapy. So I know in the beginning I kind of showed you, I know in my timeline, as you go down, remember MRI was one of the first therapies that were created under the evolution of family therapy being created. There was MRI, and then under MRI, like we said today, there was strategic. Jay Haley was with MRI, saw the pattern, but now wanted to do action and break that pattern. Next section we're going to do is when Haley-Madanes joins Jay Haley in his strategic views. She agrees with them, but she feels that he is missing the final step. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So Haley-Madanes was a student and colleague of Jay Haley. She agreed with strategic therapy's focus on changing interactional patterns, but she saw something Haley didn't emphasize enough. She noticed that many symptoms weren't simply dysfunction. They were often acts of love, loyalty, or protection. Madanes' big idea: symptoms often serve a protective purpose. Example, a child acts out so the parents stop fighting. A teenager develops anxiety that keeps divorced parents working together. A spouse becomes depressed after years of caring for everyone else. The symptoms aren't random. It protects the family somehow. So this was that next step. Remember, if you were watching all my previous videos, all these therapies, as we were talking about the evolution and the creation of what we now know as family therapy, is they were just asking the next piece of the puzzle that they saw was missing. For Madanes, it was, okay, yeah, maybe MRI found the pattern. And strategic with just Haley showed us how to break the pattern. But let's not forget to question why the pattern was even created, or was even there, or was why. Because sometimes, like she said a moment ago, that's not a dysfunction. That's actually protection. You're protecting your mom. You're protecting your kids. You protect whatever it might be. So let's not look at it all at face value, at it all being bad. And that's what Madanes was trying to pull and add to strategic therapy. So again, in the exam, how are we now going to decipher MRI from strategic just Haley to Haley-Madanes? Okay, so MRI, pattern, traffic. Okay, we see the dysfunction. They don't do anything yet though. Then we get strategic with Haley, and again, sees a pattern, but then how do we break it? Oh, let's do this. And then we add Madanes, and Madanes was just that key little bit of emotional piece that was missing with, hey, let's not forget that some patterns are useful. Some patterns are there for support, help, love, protection. So let's not minimize and all automatically jump the gun that every single pattern doesn't actually have a purpose or a function that might actually be good. So Madanes asked, instead of how do we stop the symptom, she would ask, what is the symptom protecting? So strategic versus Haley-Madanes. Haley, again, focuses on changing the interactions, while Madanes was focused on the protective function of the symptoms. Haley was all about directives. Again, do this, do this, do this, do this. Madanes, same, but now directives with compassion. Haley was all about interrupting the patterns. Okay, we got to interrupt, stop that pattern that MRI found. Madanes said, okay, yeah, but let's understand why the symptoms developed in the first place. Let's make sure we don't forget that part. Haley was all about strategy. Strategic with just Haley was all about strategy. But Haley-Madanes was about strategy plus nurturing, plus care, plus emotion, plus concern. There we go. So some interventions from like more Haley-Madanes. Again, some of them kind of overlap. But remember, key words that I want you to keep an eye out for when you are trying to decipher if they are asking for strategic therapy just with Haley's information or thoughts versus Haley-Madanes with Madanes' insight in it, okay? So if they are just asking for or just discussing the pattern being broken, and we're not asking, oh, what, but, you know, they're not looking into what was that pattern trying to facilitate, okay? So if they're just asking about, hey, do you see the pattern and are we gonna actively do something to break that pattern, okay? Remember, we see the pattern MRI, then with strategic, just Haley, we are trying to interrupt that pattern. And then with Madanes' insight, Haley-Madanes is like, okay, yes, we can interrupt that pattern, that's absolutely fine. But let's not forget to reflect on what that pattern was there for. Why was it created? What was it trying to hold up? What was it trying to help? What was it trying to do? Because it might have been something good. That's the next section. Exam clues. If the vignette says a child's symptoms are keeping the parents emotionally connected, think Haley-Madanes, because we're talking about emotion. We're talking about the pattern, but there's emotion in it. So that's Haley-Madanes, remember. If it says the therapist prescribed the symptom, think strategic, because remember, it just stopped there. It saw the pattern, then it gave the directive, which was prescribing the symptom. That's the intervention. It talks nothing but emotions. So that just stops right there, right at strategic. Passing the baton. Strategic therapy taught therapists to actively change interactional patterns. That was Haley by himself. Haley showed that careful design interventions could shift a family's behavior in a short time. Madanes then reminded the field that behind many symptoms is an attempt to love, protect, and care for someone, even if that attempt is unhealthy. Their combined work became one of the most influential brief family therapies approaches and bridges naturally into later systemic models. MRI was what's keeping the problem alive. Strategic was, now that we know what's keeping it alive, what are we going to do about it? That is my little blurb on all my notes that I currently have so far. Again, I am working on this and I will redo these videos in future, I'm sure. But that is strategic Haley-Madanes. As we continue through our timeline, as we study for, or I study for the MFT national exam. So again, we just finished strategic and Haley-Madanes. Earlier I did my experiential video. I had previously already done my structural video. I might redo that one. I don't know if I have time. And then I finished last night's notes on Milan's systemic model. And so I will probably do that video and maybe redo my structural one if I have time. And as we continue to go down the timeline of the creation of family therapy as I study for the national exam, I hope you are doing well. I hope my videos, something's connecting. I'm trying to break it down Barney style. It makes sense to me. If it doesn't to you, maybe I got to do a different approach. I'm so sorry that sometimes my notes are everywhere. But again, if any little bit helps, good. My biggest thing is I want to ensure that things are connecting. I want to ensure that you are able to see how the timeline flows and how thoughts and theories are developing and growing and pulling from one another and answering questions that were not answered previously. It really helps me. Again, I kind of almost visualize the timeline in my mind. It really does help me. That's why I really got to prioritize in putting this on. I tried to do it the other day and it did not work. I'll try it again to just try to create this so I can have just a free PDF for people as you're watching my videos, so you can kind of see and get that visual of where we are in the timeline of the creation of family therapy. All right, good luck family, or sorry. All right, good luck everybody. Good luck on studying. Don't give up. Try your best. Do your best. Don't stress out. If you don't pass, you just do it again. I know I am. All right, bye.